If John D. Rockefeller woke up today with nothing but a cheap smartphone and the same brain that built America's first billion-dollar fortune, he would look around at modern billionaires with their flashy lifestyles and their desperate need for attention, and he would smile quietly. Not because he envies them, because he knows something they've forgotten. Within 5 years, without inheritance, without venture capital, without a single viral moment on social media, he would own entire industries again while the world debates cryptocurrency and argues about which billionaire tweets the funniest memes. The truly terrifying part is not that he could do it. The terrifying part is that his methods still work perfectly in today's economy, but almost nobody teaches them because the people who use these rules prefer that you stay exactly where you are. They want you chasing trends while they follow principles. They want you celebrating small wins while they build empires in silence. And the gap between you and them is not talent or luck. It is 7 specific rules about money that Rockefeller mastered over a century ago. Rules that remain hidden in plain sight, because the rich understand that real power lives in what you never explain out loud. Before we dive into these 7 rules that changed everything about how wealth actually works, take 2 seconds and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from right now. And if you're serious about understanding real money instead of just dreaming about it, hit that subscribe button because this channel exists to reveal what financial education deliberately leaves out. Rockefeller stands in the center of a modern city today, surrounded by coffee shops where people spend $8 on lattes they forget about 5 minutes later, and he feels nothing but cold clarity. The first thing he notices is not opportunity. It is waste. Everywhere he looks, people leak money like a dam with 1,000 cracks, and they do not even see it happening. This is where his first rule begins, and it is the rule that separates people who think about money from people who control it. Track every single dollar like your survival depends on it, because in the long game, it does. When Rockefeller ran Standard Oil, he did not just review monthly reports. He knew the exact cost of every barrel, every transport route, every gallon of paint used on every barrel. His competitors thought they understood their businesses, but Rockefeller understood his down to the penny, and that difference in precision gave him the ability to cut costs by fractions that his rivals could not even measure. Those fractions compounded into millions. In today's world, he would open a simple spreadsheet on that cheap smartphone, and he would track every purchase for 30 days without judgment, just raw data. Morning coffee, lunch, subscriptions people forgot they signed up for, impulse purchases that felt small in the moment. At the end of the month, he would look at the numbers and he would see exactly where his money disappears. And more importantly, he would see the patterns that most people ignore their entire lives because awareness feels uncomfortable. The lesson for you is brutally simple. You cannot optimize what you do not measure. Most people have a vague sense of their spending, a rough feeling, an approximation that always leans optimistic. Rockefeller would tell you that vague feelings about money guarantee vague results in life. This week, track every dollar that leaves your possession. Write it down. Watch how your relationship with money changes the moment you stop letting it slip through your fingers invisibly. The rich do not skip this step. They simply do it so automatically that it becomes invisible to outsiders who think wealth is about earning more instead of controlling better. Now Rockefeller walks into a modern corporation and he sees something that makes him physically uncomfortable. Bloat, inefficiency, meetings that could have been emails, employees doing tasks that software could handle for pennies, entire departments that exist only because they existed last year. This violation of his second rule offends him at a spiritual level. Eliminate waste with ruthless precision, even when it makes you look cold, because efficiency is not cruelty, it is mathematics, and mathematics does not care about your feelings. In the 1870s and 80s, Rockefeller visited his own oil refineries unannounced, and he would walk the floors looking for inefficiency, like a predator hunting prey. He once noticed that workers sealed barrels with 40 drops of solder. He tested 39 drops. Some barrels leaked. He tested 38 drops. They held. From that day forward, Standard Oil used 38 drops of solder per barrel, and that 2-drop difference saved the company thousands of dollars every single day. compounding into a fortune that most of his competitors never even noticed was possible. Today, he would look at subscription services people never use, monthly charges for convenience that costs more than the time it saves, premium features that add zero real value. He would cut them without hesitation and without guilt. The lesson is that every dollar you waste is a dollar that cannot compound into your future. Small leaks sink ships, but they sink them slowly enough that you never notice until you are already underwater. Look at your bank statement right now and find 3 expenses that add zero real value to your life. Cancel them today. Feel the resistance your mind creates, the justifications, the excuses about why you might need them someday. That resistance is the same force that keeps most people trapped in financial mediocrity forever. The rich feel that same resistance, and they ignore it anyway, because they prioritize future power over present comfort. Rockefeller now observes the modern economy, and he sees entrepreneurs trying to do everything at once, building apps and drop shipping and freelancing and creating content across 7 platforms, and he recognizes the fatal mistake immediately. Diffusion of focus. His third rule cuts through the noise like a blade. Dominate one narrow area completely before you even think about expanding. Because the person who controls 10% of 10 markets owns nothing, but the person who controls 90% of one market owns an empire. Standard Oil did not start by trying to control oil exploration, refining, distribution, and retail simultaneously. Rockefeller picked refining first because it sat at the bottleneck of the entire industry. He bought refineries when they were cheap during economic panics. He negotiated secret deals with railroads for lower transport rates because he could guarantee volume his competitors could not match. He undercut rival refiners on price until they sold to him or went bankrupt. Only after he controlled refining did he move vertically into pipelines, then distribution, then retail. Each step built on total dominance of the previous step. Today, he would not try to be a life coach and a real estate investor and a crypto trader and an Amazon seller at the same time. He would pick one skill, one market, one customer type, and he would become so good at serving that narrow segment that people would have no logical alternative but to choose him. The lesson is that depth beats width in every long-term game. You do not need 1 million followers. You need 1,000 people who trust you completely in one specific area. You do not need to sell everything to everyone. You need to own one problem so thoroughly that when people have that problem, your name is the only name they remember. This month, choose one skill you already have and go deeper instead of wider. Become the best in your city at that one thing. Watch how opportunities start appearing that never existed when you were mediocre at 5 things instead of exceptional at 1. Now Rockefeller watches the modern news cycle, and he sees panic everywhere. Market crashes, recessions, layoffs, inflation, interest rate hikes. And while everyone around him sells in fear and rushes to preserve what little they have, he feels something entirely different: excitement. Because his 4th rule is the one that built dynastic wealth across generations, and it is the rule that normal people find almost impossible to follow emotionally. Buy assets when fear is highest and everyone else is desperate to sell. Because fortunes transfer from the scared to the patient during every crisis in history. During the Panic of 1873, when oil refineries across America were going bankrupt and owners were begging for buyers at any price, Rockefeller bought them for fractions of their value, not because he was lucky, because he had cash reserves when nobody else did, and because he understood that oil demand would eventually recover even if nobody could see it through the panic. When the depression of the 1890s hit, he bought more. When competitors liquidated assets to survive, he absorbed them. Today, he would watch a market correction that sends everyone into panic mode, and he would see a clearance sale on quality assets. Real estate that drops 20% because sellers cannot wait. Stocks of solid companies that crash because algorithms and fear create temporary irrationality. Small businesses that need capital desperately and will give favorable terms to anyone with cash. The lesson is that you need dry powder during good times so you can act during bad times. The reason most people cannot take advantage of crashes is not that they lack knowledge. It is that they spend everything they earn during expansions, leaving them with nothing to invest when prices drop. Starting now, build an opportunity fund separate from your emergency fund. Even $50 a month, even $20. When the next crisis comes, and it always comes, you will have the rarest asset in a panic economy, which is simply the ability to say yes when everyone else can only say no. This is how generational wealth actually transfers, not from the smart to the dumb, from the patient to the desperate. Rockefeller now scrolls through social media on his smartphone, and he sees something that disgusts him more than waste or inefficiency. Performance. People renting luxury cars for photos, designer clothes bought on credit, watches that cost more than 6 months of rent, vacations displayed like trophies, and he knows with absolute certainty that every dollar spent on looking rich is a dollar that will never make you actually rich. His fifth rule is the one that modern culture fights against most violently. Reinvest profit invisibly for decades while living below your means, because wealth is built in private long before it is ever displayed in public. At the peak of his power, Rockefeller was worth over $300 billion in today's money. But he lived in a nice house, not a palace. He wore quality clothes, not fashion statements. He packed simple lunches. He reused envelopes. People thought he was eccentric or cheap, and he did not bother correcting them because their opinions had zero impact on his compounding returns. Every dollar he saved went back into expanding Standard Oil, buying more refineries, building more pipelines, securing more distribution. He understood something that still separates the wealthy from the pretenders today. Rich is a performance. Wealth is a structure. Rich is income. Wealth is assets that generate income without your labor. Today, he would drive a reliable used car and invest the difference between that and a luxury vehicle into dividend stocks or rental properties or index funds that compound silently while his neighbors financed depreciating status symbols. The lesson is that you have to choose between looking wealthy now and being wealthy later, and you cannot choose both at the beginning. Every financially successful person you admire lived below their means for years before they had the option to live above them. The difference is that by the time they could afford luxury, they no longer needed it for validation. For the next 90 days, find one status purchase you were planning to make and redirect that money into something that pays you back. A course that builds a skill, a tool that creates income, an investment that compounds. Feel how difficult it is to delay gratification and understand that your ability to sit in that discomfort is the only thing separating you from the people you envy. Now, Rockefeller thinks about legacy, and he realizes that most people are playing a game that ends when they die, building wealth they will spend completely, leaving nothing systematic behind. His sixth rule is about time horizons that extend beyond a single lifetime. Build structures that protect and grow wealth automatically for generations, because personal discipline dies with you, but systems outlive everyone. Rockefeller did not just make money, he created trusts. He established foundations. He set up governance structures that would manage his wealth according to specific principles long after his death. Today, the Rockefeller family is in its 7th generation, and they are still wealthy. Not because every descendant is brilliant, but because the system was designed to survive human weakness. Modern Rockefeller would create wills, trusts, investment policies, family councils that meet annually to review finances. He would teach his children not just how to earn, but how to preserve, how to think in decades instead of quarters, how to see wealth as a responsibility to future generations instead of a resource to consume immediately. The lesson for you starts smaller but follows the same logic. Open a brokerage account that automatically invests a percentage of every paycheck into index funds. Set up a high-yield savings account that you never touch except for predetermined goals. Create a one-page document that explains your financial philosophy and give it to someone you trust. These are infant versions of dynastic wealth structures, but they follow the same principle. Remove decisions from your future emotional state. Automate the behavior that builds wealth so it happens whether you feel motivated or not. The rich stay rich because they build systems that protect them from themselves. Finally, Rockefeller observes how modern billionaires handle public perception, and he sees them making the same mistakes that destroyed previous generations of wealth. They flaunt, they polarize, they create enemies. His seventh and final rule is the most misunderstood. Use strategic generosity to build unshakable reputation and influence, because money can be taxed, assets can be seized, but goodwill is the only form of wealth that governments cannot touch and competitors cannot replicate. Late in his life, after decades of being called a robber baron and a monopolist, Rockefeller became America's greatest philanthropist. He funded universities. He eradicated hookworm disease across the South. He built medical research institutions that still save lives today. People debate whether this was genuine compassion or calculated image repair, and the answer is that it does not matter because the result was the same. He transformed from villain to hero in public memory, and that transformation protected his family's wealth through generations of political change that destroyed other fortunes. Today, he would not wait until retirement to give strategically. He would donate to causes that align with his values while building his empire. He would create scholarships in his industry. He would mentor younger entrepreneurs publicly. He would be known not just as someone who takes value, but as someone who creates it for others. The lesson is that reputation is currency, and you should invest in it as deliberately as you invest in financial assets. Find one way this month to give value without expecting immediate return. Teach someone a skill for free. Contribute to a cause you believe in. Help someone in your network make a connection. Watch how this changes not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. Because people who only take eventually become paranoid and isolated, while people who give strategically build networks that multiply opportunities invisibly. These 7 rules: track every dollar, eliminate waste ruthlessly, dominate one narrow area, buy during fear, reinvest invisibly, build generational structures, and give strategically. These are not historical curiosities. They are the operating system that runs behind every lasting fortune you see today. The reason you do not hear them explained clearly is because they require patience in a culture addicted to speed, discipline in a world that celebrates impulse, and long-term thinking in an economy designed for quarterly results. Rockefeller would succeed today not because the rules changed, but because almost nobody follows them anymore, which means the competitive advantage is actually larger now than it was in his time. You do not need to follow all 7 rules perfectly starting tomorrow. That is not realistic, and it is not necessary. Choose one rule that resonated most strongly while you were listening. Maybe it was tracking your spending because you know you have leaks you have not measured. Maybe it was focusing narrowly because you have been scattered across too many projects. Maybe it was building systems because you are tired of relying purely on willpower. Choose one and commit to it for 30 days. Not as a temporary experiment, but as the beginning of a new permanent operating system for how you handle money and opportunity. The gap between where you are financially and where you want to be is not a gap of information. You now know what the rich actually do differently. The gap is execution. The gap is whether you will implement one of these rules this week, or whether you will consume this like entertainment, feel inspired for 20 minutes, and then return to the exact same financial habits that have kept you stuck until now. Rockefeller's advantage was never secret knowledge. It was simply his willingness to do what everyone knows they should do, but almost nobody actually does consistently. If this video gave you even one insight you can use immediately in your real life, make sure you are subscribed to this channel, because we exist to break down how money and power actually work behind the stories the financial industry tells you. And remember, wealth whispers while poverty shouts, which means the most valuable lessons are usually the ones nobody is screaming about on social media. Now go apply what you learned before the feeling fades, because information without implementation is just entertainment, and you did not come here to be entertained. You came here to change something, so change it.